What if your boss told you that to get the promotion you've been working toward for years, you had to end your marriage? Not perform better, not relocate, not take a pay cut, end your marriage. That is not a hypothetical. That is a real conversation that has happened inside real office buildings behind closed doors, with real people sitting across from real executives who believe they had that kind of power over another human being. And today, we are going to tear that apart completely. Let's start with the setup because the details matter here. Picture someone who has given a decade of their life to a company. They've skipped birthdays, missed anniversaries, worked weekends without extra pay, all in service of climbing toward that executive seat. They're talented, driven, and by every measurable standard, they deserve the promotion. Then the meeting happens, the one they've been waiting for, and instead of a congratulations, they receive a condition. The people at the top have decided that their spouse is a liability. Maybe they find the partner distracting. Maybe there's some personal conflict. Maybe the executives just want to see how far this person will bend, so they deliver the ultimatum. Divorce your spouse, or the promotion disappears. Let that sit for a second. We have to acknowledge what's actually being asked here, because it's so obscene that the mind almost wants to rationalize it away. This isn't a company asking an employee to move to a new city. This isn't a demanding travel schedule or a difficult workload. This is an institution reaching across the boundary between professional life and private life and demanding that a person destroy their most intimate human bond. This is control dressed up as opportunity, and the person on the receiving end of that ultimatum is now trapped in one of the most brutal psychological positions imaginable. Here's the first layer of the trap. They've already invested years. The sunk cost isn't just time, it's identity. So many ambitious professionals tie their self-worth to their career trajectory. When you've spent a decade defining yourself through your work, the idea of walking away from the prize feels like a kind of personal annihilation. The company knows this. That's not an accident. The people engineering this ultimatum are counting on exactly that psychology. They're betting that the employee's ambition will override their basic dignity. That's not a business decision. That's predatory manipulation. Now let's talk about the marriage side of this because it deserves its own honest examination. The spouse in this equation is essentially being told, through this ultimatum, that they are worth less than a job title. They have no seat at this table. Nobody asked them anything. Somebody in a boardroom decided that their relationship is an obstacle to corporate efficiency, and they could simply be factored out of the equation like a bad quarterly number. The dehumanization here is staggering. A spouse, a partner, someone who may have supported this employee through every late night and every sacrifice, is being treated as a problem to be solved. And what does the employee do with that? How do you go home and look at the person who believed in you and tell them that your employer has assigned a dollar value to your relationship and found it lacking? Because that is essentially what has happened. The company has priced the marriage. They've decided it costs too much, and now the employee has to decide whether they agree with that valuation. This is where the psychology gets genuinely dark. Some people in this position don't immediately refuse. And that's the part nobody wants to talk about. Because the ultimatum doesn't just reveal the company's values, it becomes a mirror. The employee has to look at themselves and ask what they're actually made of. And some people, when they look in that mirror, discover things they weren't prepared to find. They discover that they've been so consumed by professional ambition that the marriage has quietly become secondary, in ways they hadn't consciously admitted. The ultimatum doesn't create that reality. It just forces someone to confront it under the worst possible conditions. That is not a defense of the company. Let me be very clear about that. Whatever private tensions might exist in any marriage, a corporation has zero right to exploit them, expose them, or leverage them. The fact that an ultimatum like this might occasionally land on a vulnerable relationship doesn't make it acceptable. It makes it more predatory, because someone with real power is scanning for weakness and pressing on it. Let's also examine what this reveals about the executive culture that produces this kind of ultimatum. We're not talking about a rogue manager having a bad day. To make this kind of demand, there has to be a culture that permits it. There have to be people above that conversation who either sanctioned it or who built a climate so toxic that someone felt comfortable making this demand without fear of consequences. That culture has a name. We might call it total loyalty culture. The unspoken contract that says the company owns you completely, and any part of your life that competes with that ownership is a threat to be neutralized. It's the culture that celebrates people who have no lives outside of work, who are always available, always sacrificing, always performing devotion to the institution above all else. And here's what makes that culture so seductive and so dangerous at the same time. It works. People advance within it. The metrics look great. The commitment signals are satisfying to those at the top, but underneath the performance, you have human beings quietly dismantling themselves piece by piece, sacrificing relationships, health, perspective, and eventually the very thing that made them valuable in the first place, their judgment. When someone is so captured by a company that they would genuinely consider ending their marriage to secure a promotion, their judgment is already gone. The company hasn't gained a strong executive. They've acquired a broken one, someone whose decision-making has been compromised by a combination of fear, desperation, and misaligned values. That is not good business. That is the long-term organizational cost of short-term loyalty theater. Now here's the payoff question that everyone who encounters this scenario has to grapple with. What should this person actually do? And I want to answer that with real honesty rather than comfortable platitudes. The easy answer is, of course, refuse and report and walk away with dignity. And yes, that is the right answer. But the reality is that walking away from a decade of work and a promised future is genuinely painful, and pretending otherwise doesn't serve anyone. The cost is real. The grief of losing that professional dream is legitimate. Anyone who tells you it's an easy choice has never been in a position where their entire professional identity was on the line. But here is what's also true. Any executive position obtained through the dissolution of a marriage is poisoned from the start. You would be walking into that role having proved to those above you that you will sacrifice your deepest relationships when pressured, which means they will pressure you again. The next ask won't come with a title attached. It will just come. Because you've already established your price. You've shown the table exactly how much you can be bent. And organizations that make these kinds of demands do not stop making them once they've found someone willing to comply. They escalate. The person who refuses and walks away, or refuses and forces a legal reckoning, or refuses and makes the ultimatum public, that person is actually making the stronger long-term calculation. Because no institution that asks this of you is one that will reward your sacrifice with genuine respect. They'll reward it with continued exploitation. The sacrifice will never be enough, because the appetite of a culture like that is unlimited. What this whole situation ultimately exposes is a fundamental question about what we think corporations are allowed to want from us. There's a boundary, or there should be, between the portion of yourself you lease to an employer and the private self that belongs to your relationships, your values, and your own inner life. When a company reaches across that line and demands your marriage, they're not making a business ask. They're making a claim on your soul. And the only sane response to someone who wants your soul is to recognize that the deal they're offering was never in your interest to begin with. The promotion was never going to be what they promised. The seat at that table was always going to cost more than was ever disclosed up front. And the executive table of a company willing to make this demand is a table you should not want to sit at. Because the people already sitting there made their choices to arrive, and now they're deciding whether you'll make yours. The question isn't whether you deserve the promotion. The question is whether you can afford to become the kind of person who earns it on those terms. And the answer to that question will define everything that comes after.